Thank you, Daniel, for taking the time and joining us tonight. We are very happy to have you. At Startup Grind, we usually start with more of a personal background of our speakers. So could you please tell us a little bit about yourself, where do you come from, and about your early career before your involvement with blockchain started?
Okay. Hello, everybody, and thanks for coming. It's great to see so many people interested in the topic of blockchain and where I think we are and where we think we are going with it. My background, I was for more than 20 years a banker. I'm Swiss, so I'm typically in Switzerland. Either you're a banker or something else, but typically a banker. But I gave up my career in 2014, or rather 15, but I started looking into the topic of blockchain very, very interested starting 2014. In the bank I was a trader, I was a foreign exchange trader, so investment banking, and so you probably think that I was interested in Bitcoin and the cryptocurrencies as a trading opportunity, but that's actually not the case. I discovered blockchain as an opportunity for much more than just the hype around cryptocurrencies and trading and speculation, but I believe it's so much more than this, and so that's why in 2015, after study tour in Silicon Valley and reading a lot of books and meeting a lot of people, I decided to give up my career at the bank and start basically becoming an entrepreneur at a rather late age, but not too late as I found out since then.
Yeah, that's a pretty bold step, especially after 20 years being a banker, and then you join a movement that is basically, or at least at the beginning, was trying to dismantle the traditional banking. We'll go a little bit back. Did the financial crisis have anything to do with your decision? Because I know that blockchain really started around that time as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, looking back, I've gone through the financial crisis directly in the middle of the core of the heart of the crisis at the investment bank I was working at the time. I was in one of the big Swiss banks on the trading floor, and I basically realized how broken the system was at the time by being directly affected, by coming to work every day not knowing if the next day will be there because the financial system was essentially collapsing. And it was definitely an impact on my view on how the financial system works. But that was 2008 and into 2009 when my bank had the big crisis at the time. So it's not directly related to my decision in 2015 to quit banking. But certainly after that crisis, banking was not the same anymore, and that was clear to me that it's not going to be back to where it was. This pre-crisis hype, and it was a clear hype at the time, especially in fixed income. And so it was kind of 2011 I left the investment bank, clearly because of the aftermath of this crisis. So already there I realized it's going to be changing a lot. And then in the last few years I was in the office of the chairman, so I was kind of directly linked to the top board of the bank. And in hindsight, it obviously had something to do with the fact that the Bitcoin movement started in that time. And Satoshi Nakamoto released his paper just 3 months after the Lehman Brothers collapse, which was the height of the financial crisis. And it's not clear, I guess it's obvious that the financial crisis had a strong impact on all of that getting going. And while it was very slow at the beginning, it was definitely clear to the people that were involved in releasing Bitcoin that something has to change. And so
it was a good time to start for them.
It was definitely a good time, yeah. It was the perfect time because nobody had any trust anymore in the financial system. Everybody hated banks, and everybody were kind of disappointed by the impact this financial meltdown had on the whole society, especially also in the US when it comes to Wall Street collapsing. And it was perfect timing for getting a new revolution going.
So what were like the features when you first learned about blockchain that really got your attention? Like, oh wow, I really want to know more about this, and I'm open to change the whole course of my life and my career to do this.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately for me, the revelation was the fact that there was something new that empowered people individually, so the decentralization aspect of it. So there's no central middlemen that are controlling the world. I'm not a total libertarian person, and I don't believe in this whole concept of everything will be gone and banks will be gone and governments will be gone. Everything will be totally decentralized. I don't believe in that, but I also at the same time believe in the fact something needs to change on many different levels in society, on governments, on the financial services industry, and it will take some time, but it will change. And the whole combination of what blockchain is all about is about decentralization. And being Swiss, I know what it means because we have the most federalistic system in the world, I think. So we are fully empowered as individuals. The people in Switzerland are the power, not the government. Secondly, the whole concept of open source technology, everybody can contribute, everybody is part of the game if they wish to do so. And now this aspect of incentivization through something like a cryptocurrency, these things together made it very promising for me to get engaged. And I was at the height of my career at the bank. I didn't know where to go from where I was, and so this revelation of this new way of organizing financial services or societies, together with some of the promising aspects of helping other people or helping each other and a growing community, a global growing community, that attracted me. And so obviously also I believe fully that there's a lot of business opportunity in all of that. Otherwise I'm not an NGO or a non-profit company. We are doing business and we're trying to be successful with our businesses. But I mean, there's a totally different approach to it. And if you're in the blockchain scene, then you can see that there's a lot of good. Doing good is a lot of the thing at the forefront.
So you started by founding Nexus Square. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I'm not technology expert by any chance, any kind.
Yeah, this is pretty interesting actually, because you have a very different background, and blockchain is like a mystery to a lot of people that are not really into tech.
Yeah.
But you are a good example that you can still do a lot of useful things.
Yeah, I mean, I was always interested in technology, internet, and so forth. And my job at the bank, I was also in charge for trading APIs. We developed solutions for hedge funds to trade via APIs with us. So I was kind of linked to technology always, and I was always interested. And I also worked with technologists in the bank as well, and I loved that, creating new products with them. But I definitely have no background in programming, no the software engineering, no nothing. But again, it's not about the technology from my perspective, it's about what it can do and how you actually can combine these things. I know a little bit about how a blockchain operates in the sense of the
basic mechanics,
hash functions and stuff like this. I know that in the meantime as well, but it's not something that is driving me, because I have a lot of friends, thank God, that are experts and top engineers and programmers. That's not what I need to bring to the table. I'm bringing to the table that I have a bit of experience in business. I have developed projects. I was working with, as I said, a lot of engineers delivering projects, so I can basically claim that I have a bit of experience there. And sometimes that's missing, that the top people in blockchain, the best engineers and the best brains, they lack a little bit of the business side. And so it's proof that it's a good combination of my skill set together with the people that I then co-founded my companies. And my first company, given the lack of experience in IT and given the lack of my understanding of technology, was an advisory company. And that's Nexus Squared. The goal was there to help startups, which was my big driver to become an entrepreneur. It was sharing my knowledge on the business side and helping startups with business experience to come to life. And we co-founded that together with my partner, who is now in Munich, in 2015, with the view to go and find the best blockchain startups at the time all across Europe and help them through acceleration, a program that we created together with Startup Bootcamp in London, a dedicated blockchain pre-accelerated program.
So is it still open? Like, can startups apply, or how does it work?
We have, given my other businesses, not done a program last year, but we are currently discussing to reinstall what we have done with pre-acceleration now as a service for pre-ICO stage startups. So I also have done an ICO. We can probably talk that a little bit later, but I now have the experience to see what it needs to even get to the point where you can think about doing an ICO. And so that's what we kind of trying to do this year, offering a service for startups that want to do an ICO to do due diligence with them, tell them how to write a white paper, and then ultimately through a 1 month coordinated process help them to get to the point where they can even start thinking of doing an ICO, because that's a mystery in itself. An ICO is not just a free money machine, it's a lot of work.
Yeah, well, it was interesting last year, 2017, when before blockchain was this kind of it was more a technical thing, and with the ICOs came, I would say, this hype where people started getting really crazy about investing into this, and a lot of things that were not particularly useful got a lot of money. Looks like this trend is now a little bit over, but don't you think this might have hurt a little bit the whole picture of blockchain, and makes it harder for it to spread?
Well, it definitely was a hype beyond belief, and it started with the first one was anyway, the first big one was Ethereum at the time in 2014, but then there was the DAO disaster, and I personally believe now it's over with Ethereum. Nobody will ever invest in Ethereum anymore. It was at $7, and that was totally wrong. But then the hype started, and then in 2016, with the first few big ones that came up, and also unfortunately all in Switzerland, Tezos and the disasters that we have seen since then with some of these big hundreds of $1 million startup ICOs. There was a total craziness, and thank God it stopped. Thank God it kind of peaked in December, and now since then it corrected a little bit. It hurt me a little bit with my ICO, because definitely I could have probably would I have started 6 months earlier, raised much more money, but that's beside the point. We didn't do it.
I think a lot of people after these experiences, they just put an equal sign between ICO, Bitcoin, and scam.
Yes. But that's what we try to correct now, especially with my latest venture that we are now doing on ICO advisory side as well. But going back to the ICO, to the Nexus Squared story, I then basically traveled Europe, and I started blockchain meetups all over Europe, especially also on this side of Europe when it comes to the talent here. I think personally the best talent, especially in Prague as well, is sitting on that side of Europe because of the background in math and the natural sciences. I had one started here. I think the first one was here, together with my friend Jan, who's co-organizing the meetups here in Prague still. I was in Estonia, I was in Warsaw, I was in Budapest. We did one then in Liechtenstein. So I started up these meetups on blockchain. So not Bitcoin, because everybody had a Bitcoin meetup, but we then, again, with my background, we try to bring it to the people that are more business focused. So we try to organize many meetups regularly to inspire people with new business ideas, and we bring startups to these meetups to talk about their businesses, and so trying to inspire people to also think about getting in the business of blockchain. And through that, I then in Estonia discovered what I then basically was my vision for my real startup at the moment, which is called Perceivis, about digital society and e-government, and how blockchain combined with this topic can change the world in a big way, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting to see this trend that it starts as a totally anti-governmental, individualist, decentralized thing, and over time it's becoming embraced by institutions, financial investors. Some states get involved. So where is this all going? What's going to be the future? The relationship between the state or the banks?
Oh, it's a good question. I mean, what I see the opportunity, obviously, with e-government and digital services for citizens across the world is in the blockchain context is fighting corruption, fighting injustice systems, and that's where I basically see I'm doing at the moment a lot of work trying to inspire people to help people in the humanitarian context, so refugees, for instance. So that there's a lot of opportunity for bringing good to people that are struggling for their everyday life. And so I'm not talking about e-government as a big disruptor for a government like in Switzerland, where I'm coming from, but also there. I mean, new technologies allow for new services to citizens, and more efficient government is also more citizen-friendly government, and is more tax efficient if you do a lot of things digitally. So obviously there's a lot of things as well, but I think there's much more opportunity, especially in up and coming and emerging markets, for such technologies, because they can do this quantum leap from...
So they are more open to this than the developed states.
And I see that across the world, it's everybody thinks this technology is now the next revolution after the internet and social media. Now blockchain, which it is actually enabling trust on a digital way, in a digital way, and is enabling the what I also strongly believe is going to change is what we've seen over the last years with these fake news and Facebook scandals and data hacks and everything, where people and companies or governments even don't protect our personal data as an asset that we basically is the biggest asset of the future. And more and more of these scandals will make more and more obvious that something needs to change, and blockchain is the solution to this eventually, so that you can actually co-own and then ultimately own your own data, you manage your own data, you can save it and store it safely, and that's where my big opportunity for my company lies. And so I don't think it will be totally taken over, this aspect of revolution in that technology still. Society will change, it's not going to change totally, and we will have totally distributed societies, and there will be no government oversight anymore. That's not going to happen, and that's also not going to totally disrupt banking industry, because banking is not just a one-dimensional. It's you got from retail banking, which will be totally changed thanks to almost free payment services that you can get thanks to technology like blockchain, to other services in banking that will be revolutionized thanks to this transnational cross-border functionality that can be applied. But if it's not going to change personal wealth management for the very rich people, where they need to have somebody to talk to about investments and stuff like this, it will also not change dramatically what we see in investment banks when it comes to corporate finance and big transactions between companies. And so there is also an element of advice that will stay. But a lot of the transactional stuff can be changed by the technology, and so we'll just see shifting business opportunities in the banks, in the financial services industry, in insurances as well. There's going to be a lot of opportunity in insurance.
And what is in the way of this? What are the challenges? Why, why isn't it going to happen so fast?
I mean, obviously, technology-wise, it's still immature when it comes to the. I'm especially talking about the open source technology, blockchain solutions like Bitcoin, Ethereum, where there's no central authority that is helping to develop the solutions in a coordinated fashion forward. The technology itself, as if it is managed like the way it is managed in the case of Bitcoin, where there's thousands of people participating, then there's a small team that is the core team that is deciding on what is the functionality to be used in the next release. And then there's also a huge disagreement in the teams about should blockchain scale, should Bitcoin scale, should it just be what it is now, a very secure system that is not necessarily meant to replace payment services and stuff like this, but it should be the ultimate end game when it comes to security and unhackable and slow, but very stable and secure. And so these arguments that are going back and forth and make it very slow in the sense of progressing. And I think that's a weakness, but at the same time, like the Swiss political system, it's very stable because there's no rush decisions and hardly any mistakes. Once a decision is taken, it's usually a compromise. The compromises are usually done so that everybody can agree to them. And so while it's slow, it's at least stable, and that's kind of...
Yeah, this happened already in the past when some of the coins divided into two streams after they were not able to make the decision, right? So, this could be like a threat to the blockchain technology itself. That
I mean, who knows what will happen in the next few years, but we are not at the end game. I always say it like this, and probably a bit naive if some experts here are in the room, but the internet in the 90s is also not the internet like now. I mean, in the 90s, when I first started using internet in 94, you basically had to dial into some node, and then you started up some at the time it was CompuServe, and then you had the first browsers, and you had these primitive websites with pictures that took forever to load, and some gardening or cooking recipes, and that was the highlights. And so nowadays we look the internet with streaming services, videos that are just on real-time consumption, and all these high bandwidth topics that would not have been conceivable at the time. And so I think it's a question as well of optimizing the blockchain technology as well. And there might be there are new based solutions coming out every day, especially also in China and then in other parts of the world that might replace Bitcoin eventually, because it's simply not evolving enough, and some new technology, or in Germany this is IOTA, and there's other potential candidates to take the lead. And so who knows what's going to be the end state when it comes to an efficient blockchain technology? Nobody, I think, at the moment.
And which technologies do you use at your projects, or are you open? You are looking at what's on the market, what's new, and you keep like open doors?
We are not so decided yet. We obviously work with Ethereum we did our ICO on our Ethereum platform. We did work with the digital identity solutions with Ethereum, but also we started looking into solutions like Sovereign when it comes to digital identity. It's a sort of a semi-public, semi-private blockchain. Then we have engaged with Neo, who invested in us, so the Chinese competitor to Ethereum. So we are looking at different things. Again, I think it's the only right thing to do. There's no clear contender for the winning bet at the moment. So we need to be somewhat open, I think, if you don't want to be cornered at some stage. And so my team in Zurich and my team that I work with here in Prague are doing basically a lot of research at the moment of what the best solution eventually will be for.
Yeah, and so if I understand correctly, ProCivis and Valid are the two things that you are focusing on right now. Can you just tell us what are they about? What's the difference? What's the business idea behind it? Because I see that it can be very useful, but of course it's still a business. It has to
eventually make some money. So as I said before, I was in Estonia in 2016 for the first time. And I realized there what it means to have digital society and a government that is open to technology. And I realized after doing a research paper on it that everything is core and everything is down to a digital identity when it comes to fully digitalized society. And so people need to be able to securely and in a trusted way and identify themselves via a digital identity, which they have done in Estonia to the dot, and everybody just works digitally there. There's no signatures on paper anymore. Not everything is done via this digital signature and digital identity service. And around that, the whole ecosystem developed around government services, around private sector services. Everything just focuses on the digital identity.
But they were not using blockchain yet, right?
No.
Okay.
So basically, I realized that. I looked at what they've done. They claim it's a blockchain, but it's kind of a private database that is distributed among some of the government offices. That's beside the point. The point was that the digital identity is the enabler, and then the services around it are what's making the difference. And so I then combined this vision of a digital society. Back at Switzerland, we are, I think, in Europe behind Bulgaria on something when it comes to services in the government space on 32nd place, so rather embarrassing for a country like Switzerland. So I saw an opportunity there, and so I said, let's do a digital identity service now, taking it to the next level with technologies that in Estonia are not there, because they basically have done it so long ago that
It's not yet available. Right?
They're stuck on what they currently have, yeah. So we said, okay, let's take a smartphone, which I believe is going to be the basis for everything in the future anyway when it comes to our everyday life, and combine with the blockchain security aspects, build a service around it that we can basically then use as a digital identity through QR code mechanisms and stuff like this. And that we built now, it's called EAD Plus. We have delivered that to the first state in Switzerland last December. And it's nothing to do with blockchain. We have basically only one link to blockchain when it comes to hashing the identity. So if you register your identity, you can actually hash it to the Bitcoin blockchain, and then you have an immutable proof of the creation of the identity, but nothing more than that. So again, I don't believe anything is ready yet to be used in that big context of government services and blockchain. We are not there yet. I would not, and we have a case in Switzerland of a different state where they use already U-port from Ethereum as an identification mechanism. I think it's just too early. I think I would never go to a government and sell them some blockchain identity solution at the moment, because once it's there, it's there, and then you cannot really.
So is it like the scalability basically of the technology? It's not yet out.
The readiness, and as I say, if Ethereum is overtaken by Neo next year, and you're stuck on Ethereum because you use U-port, then you're kind of blocked, and it could be quick death. And so we decided we just build our own homegrown solution that is just basically a cloud-based service, which we now will develop into version 2, which is going to use self-sovereign identity protocols. As I said before, we're working with Neo and we're working with Sovereign at the moment to see, and the Ethereum meta standard is now developing as well. That is ultimately bringing together all these identity protocols. And we built that as a next evolution of the product as a service for identity. And with that, we now start also building other services around it, because the identity, as I said, is just the enabler. It's not the end. It's not the
it's just the entry point, right?
Yes. And now our focus, and my personal focus, is e-voting as a service, so that you basically have a blockchain-based e-voting system that cannot be hacked by definition, that is anonymized in a way that you can actually not track back who voted what, but you can actually make sure that only the people that are enabled to vote can vote, and only once. And so identity is needed to actually enable such a system. And so that's my next iteration of what we're doing with Procibis.
And so what's the business model behind it? Your customer is the government, and
our first client, as I said, is a Swiss state. That's basically now a paying client. They basically pay us in a user-based fee, a license fee. We now sold this solution to a first non-profit case. We are also working with NGOs and the UN to see how we can enable people, as I said, in the emerging markets with it. We have just announced 2 weeks ago a project in the case of the Rohingya refugees in Malaysia and Burma, where basically they will use our platform to identify the diaspora of Rohingyas, because they are spread across the region and they are under very bad conditions. They are stateless, and so to give them an identity opportunity via technology like this could help them a lot. And so we are working with that, with some NGOs to deliver this project for free. Obviously, that's not going to be charged for them. So that's the next big thing. And then we have a huge project that we are in the pipeline in South America, where we also discussed with governments to do this. So it's going to be a user-based solution, fee-based service, and so it definitely should be profitable.
Okay. So I guess Daniel told me he'll have to leave a bit earlier today. So I would suggest that we move on to some questions. So will other countries enforce their interests and rules on Swiss blockchain-related companies? I guess that's if you go abroad, in a similar way to USA breaking the Swiss banking secrecy.
Yeah, that's a very good question, and that's obviously we didn't really discuss the Switzerland and ICO situation, and obviously we have now I personally think a huge opportunity when it comes to becoming a bit of a Silicon Valley of Europe, or whatever you want to call it. We call it Crypto Valley. It's been going strong since Ethereum was incorporating their foundation in Zug, in Switzerland, which is just about half an hour outside of Zurich, where I come from. And with the success that we have now, and the fact that our regulator, thank God for a change, is a bit more open to innovation than in the past, and the fact that we have had the issues with Swiss banking secrecy from the past, which is also probably a little bit misunderstood somewhere in the world, why it happened the way it happened. But independent of that, yes, there's a risk, because we are now very successful as a small nation when it comes to these ICOs. And I personally have some doubts that everything was done well last year when it comes to the big ICOs. I think there's going to be some repercussions about some of these very big ICOs that we will yet have to see. And then the US will take some steps again against Switzerland and against any other country. Like, we also have the second point here about Malta. Malta is catching up quickly. Gibraltar is becoming the haven in Europe, Liechtenstein anyway. Singapore is at the forefront. So smaller countries that take the opportunity because of financial services pressure or something to do with their economic system, they need to do something innovative. And I think that's at the core still the truth. And at the core, so even for Switzerland, there's a big opportunity. The US has missed the train there. I'm very critical about the way US regulation works in general, because again, I've seen it when it comes to the financial crisis. I've seen it at first hand when it comes to how the US reactively enforced new laws to people that were involved in business 10 years earlier, and it's, from my perspective, a very unfair system. And I don't personally give a shit what the US is thinking or doing. I'm not doing business at all in the US because of that, because I know that the US legal system is just not, you cannot trust it. It's simply not trustworthy in that sense. And obviously the US is also a bit hypocrite when it comes to it, because Delaware or Wyoming now, they are very forthcoming when it comes to blockchain technology regulations, but they have no chance because the federal government legal system doesn't allow it. And so, yeah, I think unfortunately for the US, they missed the train when it comes to blockchain regulation or Bitcoin in general. So,
like in the really long run, do you think there might be some widely used applications that are really disconnected from any state authority, and or do you think blockchain has the capability to replace in some areas the sovereigns?
I think it has. The way the internet, there needs to still be some international government embraced bodies that are setting standards, the way the internet works. And also the internet is not a free system in that sense. If you go, as I said just before, I mean, I was in Oman last year, you cannot use some services. I was in China this year, other services don't work. So obviously it's not like it's totally open, but I think with blockchain as well, these payment services that are about to come to the forefront now, they cannot be stopped by governments. And so long they add value to the individuals and the governments see there is no real threat to what I obviously fully support is all the question about money laundering and anti-corruption and all these illegal things that need to be stopped. And that's why I actually embrace regulation to the point where it makes sense that the system is safe in the sense of using it. But I don't think it can be stopped in a way that just stop Bitcoins. That's unconceivable. And especially when you look at the big picture, what China is doing at the moment with investing so much money and so much government efforts into blockchain research as an opportunity, obviously at a dimension 10 times or 100 times bigger than what Europe is doing when it comes to the opportunity there as a geopolitical strategic advantage for Asia as well overall. I think it's anyway a given that it will evolve into a system that will globally be used.
Okay. What's your opinion on permission blockchain and on the approach banks choose to implement blockchain technology?
It's also, I mean, I think there was a big hype in 2015 when I started it. My own bank had one of the first labs dedicated to blockchain technology in London, and And there was this big belief that if you now kind of close down the open source aspect of it and do it among a big consortium of 90 banks to build a blockchain that is permissioned among themselves, there's a lot of opportunity in it. There's a couple of problems with that. First of all, 90 banks across the world will never agree to one standard. I've been personally involved in setting standards for protocols to do with trading, and it's an impossible task, even between a smaller group of banks. There's so many legacy dependency systems that are just incapable of agreeing to one standard. So I think permission blockchains make sense in certain circumstances. The banks see a lot of opportunity with that. That's, again, on one hand, they want to block it. In Switzerland, we cannot get a bank account as a blockchain startup because they don't like business models behind it sometimes. They don't understand them, mostly. On the other hand, they invest a lot of money in blockchain because they see this as a quantum leap forward to replace their legacy systems that are outdated. And if you can share the cost of a database infrastructure together with other parties or stakeholders in a banking context, then obviously you share the cost, and that's interesting. And obviously it also helps the banks when it comes to capital efficiency. If you have to underlie a lot of capital to protect your business after the financial crisis, that was one of the big changes, that the banks need to be much better capitalized, and that capital sits there to be protecting for settlement risk or credit risk and stuff like this. If you can free up that capital now thanks to the fact that you can do real-time settlement, so there's no T+2 or T+3 or whatever, T+20 for complex structured products or structured loans, and you can do that real time. You can release that capital. That basically means they can save a lot of money by just not underlying capital. And so they see it much more as a business saving opportunity rather than as an innovation.
Do you think e-voting will increase attendance? I'm pretty sure it would.
I certainly hope so, and that's one of the reasons why I believe in it, is that it attracts other people. Again, in our case in Switzerland, we have like every quarter referendums to decide about. It's getting so much that people are getting tired of being asked all these questions and having to decide constantly about all these initiatives and referendums and stuff like this. So on one hand, it will hopefully increase participation rates because it's easy to participate. And e-voting for me is not just the act of saying yes or no in this case, but also being informed in a different way. And obviously, what we are doing is building a voting system that is starting with voter information, that you actually get the information in a modern way. In Switzerland, we have a lot of paper-based.
We as well.
Okay. So if you can do this in a more animated fashion and you be informed about complex topics via videos or other means, and then bring that to the point where you have to decide, and you decide by saying yes or no in an integrated fashion, that should hopefully engage more people again in the democratic way. So that's one of the big beliefs I have.
So how can you recognize which platform, Bitcoin or Ethereum, is perspective for the future and will actually survive? What are the criteria that you look at when you are choosing?
Again, I mean, first and foremost, look at the prices of the cryptocurrency. It's a pretty good indicator if people believe in it or not. So if Ethereum is going up or is correcting as it did over the last few months by 2/3, then obviously there's an indication that people have less belief, and in parallel other it's like share prices basically. You look at the crypto market prices and see what's trending and what's not. Obviously at the moment it's small liquidity, so the markets move one way or the other way pretty much in one go, but there's always outliers, and so we can see a little bit there where the trends are going. But don't be fooled by the pump and dump schemes where people are buying to sell outrageous price and just pump them up and sell them down. So that's one. But then obviously the technology itself, you need to study the technologies and find out what the community is saying about it. And again, I'm not reading these blogs on Reddit and or GitHub and follow the developer community stuff. That's why I thank God have a good team. But the only way is to get engaged with it and read about it and make your own opinion.
So do you have any good tips on resources, like when you started, any good books or any particular, I have an idea. I think it might be good for blockchain, but I know nothing about it. So where do I start?
Maybe Google, just go and say blockchain and then your interest, and then you find definitely articles. There's not a topic in the world that apparently blockchain will not solve in the future. So blockchain, today I read about blockchain and what was that? Some crazy combination. And so anything is being covered by blockchain in the future if you read all these blogs. But I think if you want to get really going with it, the topic from a really high level perspective, read the books that are written by Michael Casey. That's my guy that basically influenced my decision to resign. He's an ex-Wall Street Journal journalist. He wrote The Age of Cryptocurrency and now Just the Truth Machine. These are two books that are totally easy to read and very inspiring. And so that's where I would start with getting hands dirty, and then subscribe to Cointelegraph and all the other online portals that are producing news on an hourly basis about it, and just follow the headlines and then get going with it like this.
Okay, one last question. So basically you believe that blockchain is here to stay forever and it's not going to disappear, maybe in some different form, but you really believe that it will be here?
I believe the principles of blockchain technology will be here to stay. So again, decentralization, open source, the mentality of people working together, not directly driven by monetary gain, but by helping each other and the society at large. Like I always yesterday was a big conference in Switzerland with a lot of politicians that didn't understand it at all, so I explained it. The movement is like Wikipedia, where people just work together in order to create something for the community, and that's exactly what also the public blockchains are all about. And so I think these principles don't go away. I think society, again, thanks to the financial crisis, have changed a little bit and will change more. The young people have a totally different view on the world, especially also when you look at what students are looking to do in the future, especially again in Switzerland. Before everybody was a banker and everybody wanted to go into the two big banks at the minimum, or then to one of the smaller banks. Now this has totally changed. Everybody is talking about, we have, I think, the biggest development center of Google in Zurich as well, outside of the US, and so Google is number one. Everybody wants to go there, which is a problem for us. All the good tech talent goes to Google or to IBM Research or something like this. But so I think the society overall will change and will continue to change thanks to the technology and the fundamental principles that are behind it.
Okay, thank you.